stars looked different from the bridge of the New Horizon, as Captain Jake Morrison watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime stretched across space like a metal city floating in the void. Its lights blinking in patterns that meant nothing to human eyes but probably carried messages between the thousands of alien species living inside. Jake ran his hand through his dark hair and felt the familiar ache in his shoulder where an old wound still bothered him during long flights. 20 years of service had left their marks on his body, but those marks were hidden beneath his clean blue uniform. The Federation didn't need to know about humanity's scars just yet. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the station," said Lieutenant Amy Collins from her position at the communications console. Her young face showed the excitement that all of them felt. This was history in the making. First official contact between Earth and the Galactic Federation. "Put it through, Amy." The main screen shifted from the view of the station to show a tall, thin creature that looked like it was made of blue crystal. Its voice came through the speakers with a musical quality that made Jake think of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Zethkar of the Veltar species. We have waited long to meet your kind in person. Please follow the guidance beacons to Docking Bay 7. We have prepared quarters and facilities suitable for your biological needs." Jake stood up from his captain's chair and straightened his uniform. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Carter was checking her tablet for the 100th time, making sure all her research files were ready. Commander Rick Hayes stood near the weapons console, his hand resting casually near the controls even though their weapons were powered down, as required by Federation protocol. "Thank you, Ambassador Zethkar. We're honored to be here." Captain Jake Morrison of the ship New Horizon requesting permission to dock. "Permission granted, Captain Morrison. We look forward to beginning the integration process." The transmission ended and Jake felt his stomach tighten. Integration process. The Federation had been watching Earth for 50 years, ever since humans had developed faster than light travel. They had decided that humanity was ready to join the galactic community. But Jake knew they had no idea what humans had really been doing during those 50 years. "Take us in, Amy, nice and easy." The docking process took 2 hours. Federation technology was far ahead of human systems, and their docking clamps attached to the New Horizon with movements so precise, they barely felt the connection. Jake gathered his senior crew and checked his appearance one more time in the mirror of his quarters. The man looking back at him had kind blue eyes and a face that showed confidence, but Jake could see the weight of secrets in his own expression. The airlock hissed open and Jake stepped into a corridor filled with soft white light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Ambassador Zethkar waited for them, even taller in person than he had appeared on screen. His crystalline body caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the metal floor. "Captain Morrison, welcome aboard Nexus Prime. I trust your journey was comfortable." "It was, thank you. This is Dr. Lisa Carter, our science officer, and Commander Rick Hayes, head of security." The crystal being nodded to each of them with fluid movements that were almost hypnotic to watch. "Excellent. We have much to discuss, but first we must complete the standard medical and biological assessment. It is required for all new species joining the Federation. Purely routine, I assure you." Jake felt Rick tense beside him, but the commander's face showed nothing. Lisa stepped forward with her usual enthusiasm for anything involving alien science. "We'd be happy to participate. I've been looking forward to seeing Federation medical technology." Ambassador Zethkar led them through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Jake saw creatures that floated instead of walked, others with too many arms or eyes in places that seemed impossible. All of them moved with the calm efficiency of people going about their daily business. But Jake noticed how some of them stopped to stare at the humans as they passed. The medical facility was a massive chamber filled with equipment that hummed with quiet energy. Machines lined the walls, their purposes unclear but their advanced nature obvious. In the center of the room stood a large cylindrical scanner that rose from floor to ceiling like a glass tower. "This is our medical assessment network, version 7. We call it Man 7 for simplicity. It will record your biological signatures, genetic patterns, and physical condition. The process is completely painless and takes only a few minutes per individual." A voice came from speakers hidden throughout the room. It sounded mechanical but with hints of personality that suggested advanced artificial intelligence. "Greetings, human subjects. I am Man 7. Please step forward for assessment. Order is not important." Dr. Carter moved toward the scanner first, but Jake put a gentle hand on her arm. I'll go first. Captain's privilege. He stepped into the cylinder and felt a strange tingling sensation as invisible beams of energy passed through his body. The scanner hummed quietly, and Jake could see lights blinking in patterns along its walls. The process seemed routine until suddenly the humming changed pitch. The lights began flashing faster, and Jake heard Ambassador Zethkar make a sound of surprise behind him. The AI's voice filled the chamber again, but this time it carried something Jake had never heard in an artificial intelligence before. Uncertainty, almost fear. Scanning complete. Biological patterns recorded. However, I must report unusual findings. Subject exhibits extensive physiological scarring inconsistent with normal life patterns. Damage indicators suggest combat exposure to Class 12 entities or higher threat levels. The chamber fell silent except for the quietly concerned sounds from the alien medical staff who had gathered to watch the first human assessment. Jake stepped out of the scanner and saw Ambassador Zethkar staring at him, with what might have been confusion on his crystal features. The AI's voice continued, and now Jake was certain he heard something like worry in its electronic tones. Query for Subject Morrison, Jake, Captain. Records indicate Class 12 entities are theoretical threat levels described in historical documents only. Federation military archives contain no verified combat reports against such entities in over 47,000 years. Please clarify. Has subject engaged in warfare with deific-level opponents? The silence stretched longer, and Jake realized that every being in the medical facility was staring at him. Dr. Carter's eyes were wide with concern, and Commander Hayes had unconsciously moved into a protective stance. Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline body had gone completely still. Jake looked at the scanner, then at the crowd of aliens who were waiting for his answer to a question they clearly had never heard asked before. He thought about the long scar hidden beneath his uniform shirt, the one that ran from his left shoulder to his right hip. He thought about the battles that had given him that scar and dozens of others. He thought about the things humanity had fought in the dark spaces between stars, the things they had killed to keep Earth safe. The Federation had been watching humanity develop spaceflight, but they had missed the real story. They didn't know about the wars humanity had fought, against enemies that would have sent most civilizations screaming into the void. Jake cleared his throat and gave Ambassador Zethkar the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ambassador, I think we need to have a longer conversation than you planned. Ambassador Zethkar led Jake and his crew to a private meeting room that overlooked the vast expanse of space through a massive transparent wall. The crystalline being moved with obvious discomfort, his usual fluid grace replaced by jerky movements that showed his nervousness. Other alien medical staff had followed them at a distance, whispering among themselves in languages that sounded like music mixed with static. Jake sat in a chair designed for humanoid species, while Dr. Carter and Commander Hayes took positions near the wall. The room's soft lighting reflected off Ambassador Zethkar's crystal body as he settled across from them, creating tiny sparkles that danced across the table between them. Captain Morrison, in 50,000 years of Federation history, no medical scanner has ever asked that question. Man 7 is programmed to recognize threat levels based on scarring patterns, injury types, and cellular damage markers. Class 12 entities are theoretical constructs from our oldest legends. They represent forces so powerful that combat with them should be impossible for any biological species to survive. Jake looked out at the stars and remembered the first time he had seen something that shouldn't exist. He had been a young lieutenant then, serving aboard a patrol ship near the edge of human space. The thing that came out of the darkness between galaxies had been the size of a moon and hungry for the light of living stars. Ambassador, what I'm about to tell you is going to change how the Federation sees humanity. We've been fighting things that your people call legends for almost 90 years. Dr. Carter opened her tablet and began accessing files that had been classified at the highest levels of Earth's government. The first encounter was in 2301. We called it the Titan War because the enemy constructs were the size of cities. Artificial intelligences that had gone insane and decided to turn entire solar systems into computational matrices. Jake stood up and began removing his uniform jacket. Ambassador Zethkar made a sound of surprise as Jake rolled up his sleeves, revealing a network of scars that covered his arms like a roadmap of violence. Each mark told a story that would have sent most civilizations into hiding. This one, Jake pointed to a long, curved scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. Came from something we called a void walker. Imagine a creature that exists in the empty spaces between dimensions and feeds on reality itself. It tried to eat our solar system by pulling it into non-existence. Commander Hayes stepped forward and removed his own jacket, showing similar scarring across his shoulders and chest. The Federation's been watching us develop spaceflight, but they missed what we were really doing out there. While your people were building this station and forming trade agreements, we were fighting wars against things that shouldn't exist. Ambassador Zethkar's crystalline form had gone completely still. Show me more. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Jake pulled off his uniform shirt completely, revealing a tapestry of scars across his torso that made the alien diplomat step backward. The largest scar ran diagonally from Jake's left shoulder to below his right ribs, a jagged line that looked like it had been carved by something with claws made of fire. Solar Kraken, 2334. Picture a creature made of pure energy that decided our sun looked tasty. It wrapped itself around Earth's star and began draining the nuclear fire that keeps our world alive. We had to fly ships directly into the sun's corona to cut it away from the core. Dr. Carter pulled up holographic displays from her tablet that filled the air between them with images that made Ambassador Zethkar retreat further. The Crimson Prophet tried to rewrite human history by changing the quantum structure of our past. We fought it in 17 different timeline branches simultaneously. Jake led the assault team that finally killed it in the timeline where Rome never fell. The scar across Jake's shoulder blade was smaller, but somehow looked more dangerous than the others. That one's from something we called the Memory Eater. It consumed the thoughts and experiences of entire populations, leaving behind empty shells that looked human but had nothing inside. We lost 3 colonies before we figured out how to fight something that attacked minds instead of bodies. Ambassador Zethkar finally found his voice again, though it came out as barely a whisper. How do you survive such encounters? Our military theorists believe that Class 12 entities are beyond the reach of conventional warfare. Commander Hayes showed a burn mark that covered most of his left forearm. We don't use conventional warfare. We use impossible tactics that work because our enemies don't expect anyone to be crazy enough to try them. This burn came from manually detonating a fusion reactor inside the digestive system of something called the Planet Eater. Jake sat back down and began putting his shirt on again, but not before Ambassador Zethkar had seen dozens more scars across his back and sides. Each mark represented a battle that should have been impossible to win, fought against enemies that should have been impossible to defeat. The truth is, Ambassador, we don't fight these things because we think we can win. We fight them because somebody has to. Earth sits at the intersection of 17 major hyperspace routes and 12-dimensional fault lines. We're a magnet for every cosmic horror that goes wandering through this part of the galaxy. Dr. Carter closed her tablet and looked directly at the crystalline diplomat. For almost a century, humanity has been the galaxy's unofficial guardian service. We've been taking care of threats that would have destroyed civilizations like yours, without anyone ever knowing we existed. Ambassador Zethkar moved to the transparent wall and stared out at the stars. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of understanding that hadn't been there before. We thought we were welcoming a primitive species that had just developed interstellar travel. We prepared integration protocols for another peaceful civilization that would benefit from our advanced technology and social systems. Jake joined him at the window. Instead, you found a species that's been fighting a secret war to keep the galaxy safe from things your people only remember in nightmares. The alien diplomat turned to face Jake, and the human captain could see something like respect growing in those strange crystalline features. Captain Morrison, this information must be shared with the High Council immediately. The Federation needs to understand what humanity has been doing and why your presence changes everything. Commander Hayes was checking his communication device. Sir, we're receiving priority messages from Earth Command. Looks like our arrival here has triggered some kind of alert in the deep space monitoring systems. Jake felt the familiar tightness in his stomach that always came before bad news. What kind of alert, Rick? Long-range sensors are picking up movement in the outer dark, Captain. Something big is heading toward Federation space, and the signature matches files from the Devourer archive. Ambassador Zethkar made a sound that might have been a gasp if he had been human. The Devourers have been gone for over 40,000 years. They're myths from the early Federation period. Jake was already reaching for his jacket. Ambassador, I think you're about to learn that humanity doesn't believe in myths. We believe in preparing for the next fight. The stars outside the window seemed dimmer now, as if something vast was moving between them and the light. The High Council chamber was built to inspire awe and maintain order among the galaxy's most powerful species. 12 massive seats arranged in a circle around a central platform, where speakers would stand to address the assembled representatives. Each seat was designed for a different alien physiology, from the aquatic depth speakers who required pressurized water chambers to the energy beings of the luminous collective who existed as controlled plasma. Fields. Jake Morrison stood on that central platform 24 hours after his medical scan had sent shockwaves through the Federation's upper leadership. Word of humanity's scarred warriors had spread faster than hyperspace communications, carried by whispers and urgent private messages between species that had never imagined such a thing could exist. High Counselor Vaxthon of the ancient Etherian race leaned forward in his crystalline chair. The Etherians had been part of the Federation for over 40,000 years and claimed to remember the galaxy's darkest periods. His voice carried the weight of ages when he spoke. Captain Morrison, your species presents us with a paradox that challenges our understanding of galactic history. Our records indicate that Class 12 entities have destroyed entire civilizations. The morning stars were consumed by something called the Entropy Lords 3,000 years ago. The bright empire vanished overnight when they encountered what our archives describe as the shadow that devours light. Jake kept his hands clasped behind his back, feeling the pull of old wounds across his shoulders. Around him, representatives from dozens of species watched with expressions ranging from fascination to fear. He had never felt more alone than he did standing in this circle of alien judgment. High Counselor, those entities are still out there. We've fought the Entropy Lords twice in the last 50 years. The shadow that devours light tried to eat our colony on New Mars in 2367. We stopped it by flying a ship loaded with antimatter directly into its core. Counselor Thylax of the Militant Caraxian Empire shifted in her battle armor with obvious interest. The Caraxians were the Federation's primary military force, proud warriors who had never met a fight they wouldn't take. Her multiple eyes focused on Jake with predatory attention. Human Morrison, your words suggest capabilities that exceed our military assessments. The Caraxian war fleets are equipped with weapons that can crack planets and shields that can withstand stellar bombardment. Yet you claim to defeat entities that our combined forces could not engage. Commander Hayes stepped forward from his position near the chamber's edge. Counselor Thylax, our tactics aren't about having better weapons or stronger shields. We win by being willing to do things that logical military strategy says you should never do. Dr. Carter activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with tactical recordings from humanity's secret wars. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as human ships performed maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. Vessels flew directly into enemy fire to deliver killing blows. Captains rammed their ships into creatures the size of moons, and assault teams fought boarding actions inside the digestive systems of living starships. We call it impossible strategy, Jake explained as the recording showed a human cruiser using its own hull as a projectile weapon against something that looked like a mechanical dragon made of dark energy. If you're fighting something that can't be killed by normal methods, you don't use normal methods. High Counselor Vaxthon made a sound of distress as the recording showed human soldiers fighting hand-to-hand combat with creatures made of living shadow. Captain Morrison, these tactics appear to have casualty rates that would be unacceptable to any civilized species. How does humanity maintain military readiness with such losses? Jake felt the familiar weight of command decisions that had sent good people to their deaths. Because we understand something that your people apparently don't. There are fates worse than death. If we don't fight these things, they don't just kill us. They unmake us. They erase us from reality itself. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Jake's words settled over the assembled representatives. Counselor Zarthan of the Peaceful Harmony Collective spoke in harmonious tones that somehow conveyed deep worry. If what you say is true, then humanity has been protecting the galaxy from threats we never knew existed. Why did you not contact the Federation for assistance? Commander Hayes answered with a bitter laugh. Counselor, we tried that once. In 2298, we sent a distress signal when the Devourer fleet attacked our outer colonies. Your response team arrived 6 months after we had already won the war. They took one look at the battlefield debris and declared the area a hazardous waste zone. The holographic display shifted to show the aftermath of that ancient battle. Twisted metal fragments drifted through space alongside organic matter that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent life. Federation cleanup crews in environmental suits moved carefully through the wreckage, their scanning equipment registering energy readings that made no scientific sense. The Federation response team filed a report classifying the incident as a natural disaster involving unstable dark matter. Dr. Carter continued. They had no framework for understanding that an intelligent species had fought and destroyed an invasion fleet from outside normal spacetime. Counselor, Feixthon accessed ancient files that appeared as glowing text in the air around his seat. I am reviewing our archives from that period. The report describes massive gravitational anomalies and exotic particle signatures consistent with theoretical weapons that should not be possible to construct. Jake moved to stand, directly beneath the recordings of human ships, sacrificing themselves to protect Federation worlds that never knew they were in danger. Hi, Counselor, those weren't theoretical weapons. Those were human ships using their own fusion reactors as improvised bombs. We turned our vessels into guided missiles because it was the only way to penetrate Devourer armor. The alien representatives exchanged glances that spoke of growing understanding and fear. They were beginning to realize that humanity's primitive appearance had hidden a military capability that exceeded their own by orders of magnitude, not through advanced technology but through sheer willingness to embrace tactics that no sane species would consider. Counselor Thylex stood up in her armor, all four arms gesturing with obvious agitation. Human Morrison, if your species possesses such capabilities, why do you request Federation membership? What could we possibly offer warriors who fight gods and win? Jake looked around the circle of alien faces, seeing doubt and suspicion mixed with reluctant respect. Because we're tired of fighting alone. For 90 years, humanity has stood guard while the rest of the galaxy built beautiful civilizations and discovered wonders among the stars. We've missed out on art, science, philosophy, and friendship because someone had to keep watch in the darkness. His voice carried the exhaustion of a species that had sacrificed its innocence to protect others. We don't want to be the galaxy's hidden guardians anymore. We want to be partners in building something better than an endless war against cosmic horrors. High Counselor Vaxathon was quiet for a long moment before speaking again. Captain Morrison, your request places the Federation in an unprecedented situation. We must decide whether to welcome warriors whose very presence changes the nature of our peaceful community. Before Jake could respond, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed in patterns that clearly meant immediate danger, and the chamber's communication systems activated with urgent messages in dozens of languages. Ambassador Zethkar's voice cut through the chaos from the chamber's speakers. High Council, long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements at the galaxy's edge. Initial analysis suggests Devourer-class signatures approaching Federation space. Estimated arrival time is 72 hours. The chamber erupted in panic as representatives began shouting in alien languages, but Jake Morrison stood perfectly still at the center of it all. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the calm of someone who had been expecting this moment for years. High Counselor, I think your decision just got a lot easier. The Federation war room had never seen panic like this before. Species that had spent millennia in peaceful cooperation were now shouting at each other across holographic displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleet. The massive armada moved through space like a plague of metal locusts, each ship the size of a small moon, and hungry for the energy that powered living worlds. Admiral Kate Brooks arrived on Nexus Prime 6 hours after the emergency alert, her transport ship bearing the scars of countless battles fought in the darkness between stars. She walked into the war room with the confident stride of someone who had faced impossible odds and survived. Her graying hair pulled back in a practical military style that had seen decades of service. Jake Morrison felt a familiar sense of relief when he saw Kate enter the room. They had fought together in the Hidden War of 2298. When humanity had first encountered the Devourers and learned that some enemies could only be defeated by embracing strategies that bordered on insanity. Admiral Brooks reporting for duty, Captain Morrison. I brought every ship we could spare from Earth Defense Command. The alien military commanders turned to stare at the scarred human woman who had interrupted their increasingly desperate planning session. Counselor Thylex of the Caraxian Empire stepped forward, her battle armor gleaming under the war room's harsh lights. Human Brooks, Our combined fleets possess 17,000 ships equipped with quantum torpedoes, antimatter cannons, and defensive shields powered by controlled stellar cores. Our tactical computers indicate a 67% probability of successful defensive action against the approaching enemy. Kate Brooks looked at the tactical displays showing Federation battle formations and shook her head with the expression of someone watching children play with dangerous toys. Counselor, your computers are wrong. The Devourers don't fight like normal enemies. They eat energy, which means every shot you fire at them makes them stronger. Dr. Carter pulled up classified files from humanity's first encounter with the Devourer fleet, holographic recordings that made the assembled alien commanders step backward in shock. The images showed Federation-style tactics being used against the massive enemy ships, with results that could only be described as catastrophic. In 2298, we tried conventional warfare first, Carter explained as the recording showed human ships firing their best weapons at Devourer vessels. Every energy blast, every missile explosion, every directed particle beam was absorbed and converted into power for their systems. We watched our own attacks make them bigger and stronger. The hologram shifted to show what had happened next. Human ships began performing maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat doctrine. Vessels flew directly into Devourer energy fields. Captains ordered their crews to ram enemy ships at maximum velocity, and fighter pilots guided their craft into collision courses with enemy weapon systems. Commander Hayes stood near the tactical display, pointing out details that made the alien military leaders visibly uncomfortable. This is the UNS Defiance using its own fusion reactor as a guided bomb. Captain Rodriguez flew his ship directly into the enemy motherships core and detonated both vessels simultaneously. Admiral Brooks moved to the central command console and began accessing human military databases that had been classified above top secret for nearly a century. The Devourers aren't just ships. They're living entities that feed on organized energy. Weapons fire, shield emissions, even our communication signals provide them with nourishment. High Counselor Vaexthon accessed his species' oldest records, files that dated back to the Federation's earliest encounters with cosmic-level threats. Admiral Brooks, our archives contain references to similar entities from 40,000 years ago. Entire star systems were consumed before the Devourers mysteriously vanished from known space. Kate turned to face the assembled alien commanders with the kind of expression that had terrified human enemies for decades. They didn't vanish, High Counselor. They went to find more food. Now they're back and they're hungry. The tactical display updated with new sensor readings from the approaching fleet. The Devourer ships had grown larger during their journey toward Federation space, their hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from the cosmic background radiation they consumed while traveling. Admiral Brooks, if conventional weapons are ineffective, how does humanity propose to engage these entities? Asked Counselor Zarthen of the Harmony Collective, his harmonious voice carrying undertones of barely controlled fear. Kate smiled with the kind of expression that made Jake remember why human enemies had learned to surrender rather than face her in direct combat. The same way we won last time. We use weapons they can't absorb because they're not energy-based. She activated human tactical files that filled the war room with images of improvised weapons and impossible strategies. Ships converted into kinetic projectiles, asteroids hollowed out and filled with conventional explosives, and assault teams armed with primitive projectile weapons that fired solid metal bullets instead of energy beams. Counselor, the Devourers can absorb any form of organized energy, but they can't digest raw kinetic force or chemical explosives. A human throwing a rock hits them harder than your quantum torpedoes. Commander Hayes pulled up detailed battle plans that had been developed during humanity's secret preparation for the Devourers' return. We've spent 30 years designing ships that can function as guided missiles, weapons that work on chemical reactions instead of energy manipulation, and tactics that assume we're going to lose most of our fleet in the first engagement. The alien commanders stared at the human battle plans with expressions of horror and fascination. Counselor Thylex examined schematics for human ships that had been converted into massive kinetic weapons designed to impact enemy vessels at significant fractions of light speed. These tactics require casualty rates that exceed 90% for attacking forces. No civilized species would accept such losses. Admiral Brooks moved to stand beside Jake Morrison, both humans bearing the scars of battles that should have been impossible to survive. Counselor, That's the difference between humanity and civilized species. We don't fight wars to preserve our military assets. We fight wars to win them. The war room fell silent as the implications of human strategy settled over the assembled Federation leaders. They were being offered a choice. Between accepting tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare or watching their peaceful galaxy be consumed by entities that fed on the very technology that defined their advanced societies. High Counselor Felixthon accessed communication channels that connected him directly to the Federation's highest leadership councils. Admiral Brooks, Captain Morrison, the High Council is prepared to grant humanity joint command authority over all Federation military assets for the duration of this crisis. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders like a familiar coat. High Counselor, we'll need every ship you can spare and crews willing to follow orders that won't make sense until after we've won. Kate Brooks was already reviewing Federation fleet compositions and calculating how many alien vessels could be converted into kinetic weapons before the Devourer fleet arrived. Captain Morrison, we have 48 hours to turn the galaxy's most advanced military into a collection of guided missiles and improvised explosives. The tactical displays updated again, showing the Devourer fleet had begun active scanning of Federation space. Energy readings spiked across multiple star systems as the ancient enemy tasted the electromagnetic signatures of thousands of inhabited worlds, Admiral. Brooks looked around the war room at alien faces that showed determination mixed with barely controlled terror. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other classifications, welcome to human-style warfare. Try to keep up. The combined Federation fleet gathered at the edge of the sanctuary worlds looked nothing like the elegant formations that had once patrolled peaceful trade routes between civilized systems. Human engineers had worked for 36 straight hours converting alien vessels into kinetic weapons, stripping away energy shields and quantum torpedoes to install chemical, explosive charges and solid projectile launchers that hadn't been used in galactic warfare for thousands of years. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Determination, a human dreadnought that bore the scars of 17 major engagements against cosmic-level threats. Around him, alien crew members worked alongside human officers, their movements showing the nervous energy of beings who had never faced an enemy that grew stronger when you shot at it. Admiral Kate Brooks commanded the operation from the Federation flagship Nexus Dawn, a massive vessel that had been converted into the largest kinetic projectile weapon ever constructed. Her voice came through the communication systems with the calm confidence that had guided humanity through its darkest battles. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks. The Devourer fleet will reach the outer perimeter in 20 minutes. Remember your training, and ignore everything your tactical computers tell you about proper fleet formations. We're not here to fight a civilized war. The sensor displays showed the approaching enemy as a writhing mass of organic metal that pulsed with absorbed energy from a dozen consumed star systems. Each Devourer ship was a living entity that had grown fat on the electromagnetic radiation of dead worlds, their hulls stretching across space like the shells of cosmic parasites. Commander Hayes monitored the tactical situation from his position at the weapons console, his scarred hands steady on controls that had been modified to fire solid tungsten rods instead of energy beams. Captain, the lead Devourer vessels are beginning active scans of our fleet. They're trying to taste our energy signatures. Jake smiled with the kind of expression that had terrified human enemies for decades. Let them scan all they want, Rick. They're about to discover that humans taste different than they remember. Dr. Carter worked at the science station, coordinating with alien researchers who were still struggling to understand how humanity had survived encounters with entities that should have consumed them, along with their entire solar system. Captain, I'm reading massive energy absorption rates from the Devourer ships. They're feeding on the background radiation from Federation power cores across 17 systems. The first wave of Devourer vessels entered weapons range, their living hulls rippling with hunger as they detected the organized energy signatures of the assembled fleet. Traditional Federation doctrine would have called for long-range bombardment, with quantum torpedoes and particle beam arrays. But the human commanders had issued very different orders. All ships, hold fire until they're close enough to smell. Admiral Brooks commanded over the fleet-wide communication network. Let them come to us. Alien captains across the fleet struggled with instincts developed over millennia of conventional space combat. Counselor Thylex commanded a squadron of Caraxian battle cruisers that had been stripped of their energy weapons and loaded with chemical explosives that would have been considered primitive by Federation standards. Human Brooks, the enemy vessels are within optimal firing range. My tactical computers are recommending immediate engagement with all available weapon systems. Kate's voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to children. Counselor Thylex, your tactical computers don't understand what we're fighting. Trust human experience and hold your position. The Devourer ships moved closer, their hulls expanding as they prepared to feed on the energy emissions they expected from Federation weapons. Jake watched the tactical display count down the distance between fleets, feeling the familiar calm that came before impossible battles. All human vessels. Prepare for ramming speed, Jake commanded, his voice carrying across the communication network to ships scattered throughout the fleet formation. Remember, we're not trying to outfight them. We're trying to indigest them. The first collision came when Captain Danny Rogers of the UNS Defiant flew his converted cruiser directly into the feeding orifice of a Devourer vessel the size of a small moon. The chemical explosives, packed into his ship's hull, detonated in a chain reaction that tore through the enemy's digestive system like food poisoning on a cosmic scale. Direct hit on Devourer Prime Alpha, reported Commander Hayes as the enemy vessel writhed in apparent agony. Chemical detonation has disrupted their energy absorption matrix. Admiral Brooks watched the results of the first kinetic impact and felt the familiar satisfaction of tactics that worked. Because no sane species would attempt them, all ships commence ramming runs. Show them what human-style warfare looks like. The battle that followed violated every principle of civilized space combat. Human ships flew directly into Devourer energy fields, their crews protected by primitive radiation shielding instead of advanced deflector arrays. Federation vessels loaded with chemical explosives performed suicide runs that would have horrified military strategists from any advanced species. Jake guided the UNS Determination through a formation of Devourer ships, his vessel's hull groaning under the stress of maneuvers that pushed both ship and crew beyond their design limits. Target the big one in the center. Amy, we're going to give it a case of terminal indigestion. The massive Devourer mothership loomed ahead of them like a living asteroid covered in feeding appendages that reached out hungrily toward the approaching human vessel. Jake could feel the enemy's attempts to drain power from his ship's systems, but the UNS Determination had been designed for exactly this kind of encounter. All hands, prepare for impact, Jake commanded as his ship accelerated to ramming speed. It's been an honor serving with you. The collision between human dreadnought and cosmic parasite lit up space with an explosion that could be seen from 17 star systems. The UNS Determination's chemical warhead tore through the Devourer mothership's core like a dose of poison administered directly to its heart. While the kinetic impact shattered feeding appendages that had consumed the energy of entire civilizations, Jake found himself floating in an escape pod 20 minutes later, watching the debris of his ship drift alongside the dying remains of an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Emergency rescue beacons guided Federation recovery vessels toward the scattered survivors of humanity's latest impossible victory. Admiral Brooks coordinated the cleanup operation from a rescue ship, her voice carrying satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. All ships, the Devourer fleet has been neutralized. Casualty reports indicate acceptable losses within human operational parameters. 3 days later, Jake Morrison stood once again in the High Council chamber. But this time, the atmosphere had changed completely. The alien representatives looked at him with expressions that mixed respect, gratitude, and a healthy amount of fear for a species that treated impossible odds as routine operational challenges. High Counselor Vaexthon spoke for the assembled Federation leadership. Captain Morrison, the High Council votes unanimously to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Federation with joint military command authority. We also extend an offer for human commanders to train Federation forces in unconventional warfare techniques. Jake looked around the circle of alien faces and saw something that had never existed before in galactic politics. True partnership between species, built on the foundation of shared sacrifice and mutual respect earned through battle against cosmic darkness. High Counselor, humanity accepts your offer, but we have one condition. The chamber fell silent as representatives waited to hear what demands the scarred warriors would make. Jake smiled with the kind of expression that had guided humanity through 90 years of secret warfare. No more fighting alone. From now on, when something comes crawling out of the darkness between stars, we face it together. The medical scanner that had once trembled at Jake's scars now served as part of the Federation's new early warning system. Its AI programmed to recognize the signs of cosmic-level threats. But it no longer asked if humans had fought gods. It simply recorded another chapter in humanity's ongoing war against the impossible, fought now with allies who understood that some battles can only be won by warriors willing to bear scars in defense of those who sleep peacefully among the stars.